You're in a parking lot at night, and the world suddenly feels much bigger than it should. Your phone is at 2%. The dashboard glows a little too dim. The battery icon in your mind turns into a clock. You don't need a physics degree to feel what's happening here. Stored energy is running out, and vulnerability rushes in. Now here's the uncomfortable question. Why can a thin tank of liquid move a 2-ton car hundreds of miles, while a heavy, expensive battery struggles to do the same? And why does every society that tries to electrify everything, cars, homes, grids, eventually slam into the same wall, storage? Not, what's the best battery? Not, when will the next breakthrough arrive? The sharper question is, what is a battery allowed to be by physics? Because if you zoom out far enough, almost every modern miracle compresses into this single constraint: energy density, cost, safety, and lifetime. Transportation, renewable grids, smartphones, satellites, medical devices, disaster resilience, military logistics, even the simple promise that your life will keep working when the lights go out. All of it, quietly, relentlessly, depends on how well we can persuade matter to hold energy without letting it leak away or explode. So tonight you and I are going to do an audit. 3 reality checks. First, we compare energies by mass and volume, no vibes, just numbers. Second, we follow that energy down into the microscopic structure of matter, where the real rules live. Third, we identify the handful of breakthroughs that would actually change the world, and we'll also see, with no cruelty but with complete honesty, why most hype can't cross the physical threshold. And I'm going to ask you to stay with me through a few moments of discomfort, because the payoff is a kind of clarity that feels almost spiritual. The battery isn't failing us. The universe is simply charging rent for order. Picture us walking into a lab, sterile light, the faint smell of solvent, a bench cluttered with coin cells and calipers and crumpled gloves. Somewhere in here is a small cylinder of metal and chemistry that holds your entire day together. We pick it up. It feels like nothing. Yet inside it is a controlled imbalance, like a tiny, disciplined storm held behind a fence. That's what a battery is, matter arranged so that electrons have someplace they want to go. The whole game is to keep that want bottled until you ask for it. Let's do the first reality check. Energy density is not a vibe, it's a number. And numbers are rude in the best way. They don't care what we wish were true. We walk over to a whiteboard. I pick up a marker. You can hear the squeak. And we write the comparison that haunts the entire electrification project. Gasoline, ordinary, unromantic gasoline, contains an enormous amount of chemical energy per kilogram. Roughly 46 megajoules per kilogram. If you prefer everyday units, that's about 12 to 13 kilowatt-hours per kilogram. It's obscene. It's like nature accidentally left a cheat code lying around. Now lithium-ion batteries, today's champions, store energy through chemistry too. Not magic. Not electricity in a box. Chemistry. The best cells might hold, say, around 250 to 300 watt-hours per kilogram at the cell level. That's 0.25 to 0.3 kilowatt-hours per kilogram. Then you wrap those cells in a pack with cooling, structure, wiring, safety systems, and the pack level number drops further. Suddenly you're living in the world of 0.15 to 0.25 kilowatt-hours per kilogram. So gasoline looks maybe 50 times better by mass if you're comparing raw fuel energy to pack level battery. And even if you argue correctly that electric motors are far more efficient than combustion engines, the gap doesn't disappear. Electric drivetrains are elegant, often 85–95% efficient. Gas engines are wasteful, maybe 20–30% in real conditions. So yes, efficiency claws back a lot. But the fundamental tension remains. Liquids like gasoline carry immense energy per kilogram, and batteries, even at their best, are wrestling with smaller numbers. And here's the key insight that people miss because it's almost too simple. A gasoline car does not carry its oxidizer. It carries only the fuel. The oxygen comes for free from the air, pulled in by the engine, molecule by molecule. A battery can't do that, at least not the mainstream ones. A battery must carry the entire reaction set inside the pack, both sides of the chemical negotiation, the fuel, and the oxygen equivalent. That's not a design flaw. It's the definition of what makes it a battery. If you're feeling the weight of that, you should. Because it means that when we compare gasoline to batteries, we're often comparing a system that gets one major ingredient from the atmosphere to a system that must haul everything with it like an astronaut. The battery is a self-contained planet. Gasoline is an open ecosystem. Now, before your brain tries to file this under, so batteries are doomed. Let's add the second reality check, because the story is more interesting than doom. Power is not energy. They're cousins, not twins. Energy is how much total work you can do, the total distance you can travel, the total hours you can run a device. Power is how fast you can do it, how quickly you can accelerate, how quickly you can deliver that work. People confuse them constantly because in daily life they blur together. But physics insists we separate them. A battery can deliver insane power, instant torque, fast acceleration. That feeling when an electric car pins you back into the seat like the future just grabbed your spine, that's power. A tank of gasoline has enormous energy, but the rate at which you can turn it into motion is constrained by a whole orchestra of mechanical parts and combustion timing and heat losses. Batteries can sprint. Here's a human metaphor: power is sprinting, energy is stored calories. You can sprint hard for a few seconds, huge power. But that doesn't mean you have the energy reserves to sprint for 6 hours. Your body can dump power quickly, but your total stored energy is limited. The battery is like that, it can punch above its weight in power. But total energy, the deep reserve, runs into ceilings. And that brings us to the third reality check in the known universe category. Why lithium-ion won? Not because it's perfect. Because it's the first chemistry that learned how to be reversible without immediately self-destructing. Come closer. Imagine we shrink down and stand on the surface of an anode, the negative electrode. It's graphite, layers like a neatly stacked deck of cards. Between those layers, lithium ions can slip in and out. Not violently. Not irreversibly. With discipline. Like guests entering a concert hall and finding their seats, then leaving again without ripping the building apart. On the other side is the cathode, often a metal oxide structure with its own lattice, its own architecture. During charging, lithium ions leave the cathode and travel through the electrolyte, a chemically delicate liquid that must conduct ions but not electrons, and embed themselves in the graphite. During discharge, the ions march back. Electrons, forbidden from taking the same path, are forced through the external circuit, doing useful work as they go, powering your phone, your car, your life. If you've ever wondered what electricity really is in a battery, here's the plain version. You are paying atoms to be slightly uncomfortable in an organized way, and when they relax, the relaxation can be routed through a circuit. That's all. It's beautiful precisely because it's not mystical. But lithium-ion is not magic, and nature sends the invoice whenever we try to pack too much discomfort into too small a space. There's a voltage window. There's electrolyte stability. Push the voltage too high and the electrolyte starts to decompose, the solvent breaks apart, forming films and gases and heat. Push too low and other parasitic reactions wake up. Then there's the interface between electrodes and electrolyte. It's not a clean border, it's a living frontier. A constantly renegotiated treaty. And if you charge too fast, you can plate lithium metal where you don't want it, growing needle-like structures called dendrites, tiny metallic stalactites that can pierce separators and short the cell. A short is not just, oops. In a high-energy cell, a short is a trigger. It turns stored chemical potential into heat faster than the system can shed it. That's thermal runaway, a chain reaction where heat accelerates reactions, which produce more heat, which accelerates more reactions. Nature's way of reminding you that high energy density comes with high consequence when the fence breaks. Now let's translate the jargon into insight, because words like voltage and capacity can feel sterile until you make them tactile. Voltage is how hard the electrons want to fall. It's a height difference in an invisible landscape, a cliff that electrons are eager to drop from. Higher voltage means a steeper cliff. But steeper cliffs erode. If the cliff is too steep, the electrolyte, the landscape itself, crumbles. Capacity is how many electrons you can escort safely. Not how many you can imagine. How many you can guide back and forth, cycle after cycle, without the host structure cracking, dissolving, swelling, or building dangerous side products. Capacity is logistics. Energy is voltage times capacity. Cliff height times how many travelers you can move. You want both high, of course. But both are capped by stability, by what materials can survive without turning your battery into a slow chemical tragedy. At this point, it's tempting to ask, fine, if batteries are just chemistry, and chemistry is old, why is storage so hard? We can generate electricity in 1,000 ways. We can spin turbines, harvest sunlight, split atoms. But the moment we try to store electricity at scale, the story becomes friction and compromise. So let's step out of the lab and onto a windy ridge. You can hear it before you see it, the low, steady roar of air moving over rock and grass. On the horizon, wind turbines rotate like giant white metronomes, keeping time with the atmosphere. Every turn is energy arriving, free and restless. Generating electricity is often about catching a flow. Storing it is about freezing a flow into a memory. That's the paradox. Energy is everywhere, but it's fleeting. The moment you try to hold it, you need matter to remember a non-equilibrium state. And non-equilibrium is just a formal way of saying you're asking the universe to tolerate something that isn't finished yet. Equilibrium is the universe's favorite destination. It's the state where differences smear out, hot and cold become lukewarm, high and low become level, concentrated becomes diluted. In everyday language, equilibrium is everything relaxes. Entropy is the bookkeeping of that relaxation, the count of how many ways a system can be ordinary instead of special. So when we store energy, we're creating special. We're concentrating order. We're building a gradient, an imbalance, and trying to keep it from dissolving back into sameness. That is always an entropy fight. Now, here's where the audit gets visceral. Because batteries don't fail in one way. They fail in a dozen ways, and every one of them is energy trying to leak back into equilibrium through whatever crack it can find. So let's reconstruct the crime scene. Imagine we cut open a battery, not for spectacle, but like a careful forensic team. We watch where the energy tries to escape. First, side reactions. The electrolyte isn't perfectly stable. The electrodes aren't perfectly inert. So even when the battery sits quietly, tiny chemical deals keep happening. A little electrolyte decomposes. A little electrode gets consumed. A film grows thicker. Each reaction is small, but time is patient. This is calendar aging, the battery losing itself even when you're not using it. Second, heat. Heat is both symptom and accelerant. Every battery reaction has a temperature dependence. Warmer means faster chemistry. That includes the chemistry you want and the chemistry you desperately don't. So the hotter the cell gets, the faster degradation grows. Then degradation increases resistance. Resistance generates more heat. The loop tightens like a knot. Third, mechanical swelling and cracking. When lithium ions insert into a structure, that structure expands. When they leave, it contracts. Repeat that hundreds, then thousands of times, and you're not cycling a battery, you're cycling stress. Microcracks form. Particles lose contact. Pathways for electrons and ions degrade. It's like flexing a paperclip until it snaps, but at the scale of grains you can't see. Fourth, dendrites and short circuits. If the chemistry or the charging conditions push lithium to deposit as metal rather than intercalate neatly, you can grow those needle structures. And a needle doesn't need to be big. It just needs to bridge the wrong two places once. Fifth, gas generation and pressure. Some reactions produce gases. In a sealed cell, gas means swelling, which means stress, which means more failure at interfaces, which means more reactions. The battery becomes a slow argument between containment and chemistry. Every failure mode is the same story told in different accents. Concentrated order wants to smear into disorder. The battery is a temporary rebellion. Nature is the empire. And now we need to say the hard limits out loud, not as an act of pessimism, but as an act of respect for reality. Limit 1: Electrochemical potentials. There is only so much voltage you can get from a given set of materials before your electrolyte decomposes or your electrode becomes unstable. You can try new electrolytes, new salts, new solvents, but the basic trade stays. Higher voltage often means higher reactivity. Limit 2: Materials constraints. Ions have to move through solids and liquids. That movement has speed limits. Diffusion is not a suggestion, it's a law. If ions can't move fast enough, you can't charge fast without building dangerous gradients inside the cell, regions that get overlithiated, stressed, and unstable. Crystal structures have stability limits. Interfaces have chemistry that can turn hostile. Limit 3. Safety constraints. If you pack energy densely, you're increasing consequence. A failure in a low-energy system is an inconvenience. A failure in a high-energy system can be a fire, an explosion, a disaster. So safety engineering grows heavier as energy density rises. More cooling, more containment, more sensors, more separators, which steals some of the very density you were chasing. Limit 4. Scaling constraints. You can't cheat costs, supply chains, and manufacturability forever. A battery that works beautifully in a lab coin cell, built with exotic materials and delicate processes, may collapse when you try to build 1 billion of them, ship them across oceans, and have them survive 10 years of real human behavior. So where do we go from here? This is the moment where the internet usually throws a buzzword at you and hopes you stop asking questions. But we're not doing that. We're auditing the frontier options without hype, because the future deserves better than slogans. First, solid-state batteries. The promise is seductive: replace the flammable liquid electrolyte with a solid. In your mind, you can feel the relief: less fire risk, potentially higher energy density, possibly lithium metal anodes without the same dangers. But the bottlenecks are real. Solids touch solids imperfectly. Interfaces become the battlefield. Tiny voids and cracks form, raising resistance. And dendrites, those needle-like growths, can still occur in some solid electrolytes, especially if the current density is high or the material has defects. Manufacturing becomes a precision art. You're building ceramics or polymers that must be thin, flawless, and cheap at scale. Solid state isn't a miracle. It's a different set of trade-offs. Second, lithium-sulfur. On paper, it looks like a dream. Very high theoretical energy density. Sulfur is abundant. Light. Cheap. The kind of ingredient you want in a world trying to scale. But the shuttle effect is the villain here. Intermediate sulfur compounds dissolve into the electrolyte and wander, shuttling between electrodes, causing self-discharge and consuming active material. The cathode changes shape. The chemistry becomes messy. Cycle life suffers. Lithium-sulfur is like a brilliant student who can't stop leaving the classroom mid-lesson. Third, sodium-ion. This is the pragmatic cousin. Sodium is abundant, salt of the earth abundant. Supply chains look kinder. Costs can drop. For grid storage and some vehicles, sodium-ion can be a serious player. But sodium ions are larger and heavier than lithium ions, and the energy density tends to be lower. That's not a moral failing, it's geometry and mass. Sodium-ion may not win the race for long-range aviation or the lightest vehicles, but it could win the race for affordability and scale where weight isn't the dictator. Fourth, metal-air batteries. This is where the story circles back to gasoline's unfair advantage. Metal-air systems, like lithium-air or zinc-air, use oxygen from the air as the oxidizer. Suddenly you're not carrying the whole reaction set. You're borrowing from the atmosphere again. That's why the theoretical energy density can be astonishing. But the bottlenecks are brutal: reversibility, air management, catalysts, moisture and CO2 contamination, clogging by reaction products, and a chemistry that often wants to go one way. Discharging can be doable. Recharging cleanly and repeatedly is the nightmare. Metal air is like trying to breathe underwater using a machine that must also be your skeleton. Possible in principle, punishing in practice. Fifth, flow batteries. These are almost a philosophical shift. Instead of packing energy into a tight solid, you store it in liquid electrolytes and tanks and pump them through a reactor. The promise is longevity, thousands, even tens of thousands of cycles. Easy scaling. Want more energy? Bigger tanks. Want more power? Bigger reactor stack. But the bottleneck is energy density. Tanks are bulky. Infrastructure is heavy. Flow batteries are rarely going into your phone or your car. But for the grid, where land exists and weight isn't the tyrant, they can be exactly the kind of boring, durable workhorse that saves a renewable future. Now, if you've been keeping score, you might feel the pattern. Every next battery is a negotiation. You gain something and pay somewhere else. Energy density fights safety. Fast charging fights lifetime. Abundance fights performance. Elegance fights manufacturability. So here's the pivot, the moment the audit becomes something deeper than technology talk. The eureka isn't that one chemistry is good and another is bad. The eureka is that we were never comparing technologies. We were comparing ways of persuading matter to hold a gradient. We were comparing different strategies for trapping an imbalance without letting it dissolve. A battery is a temporary pocket of low entropy. That phrase can sound abstract, so let's make it human. Think about cleaning your room. You can do it. You can impose order. You can stack books, fold clothes, align objects. But the room does not stay that way for free. Life moves through it. Dust settles. You pull one shirt out, then another. The order you created slowly unravels, not because you're lazy, but because the natural flow of time in a lived space pushes toward messiness unless you keep spending energy to maintain structure. A battery is a cleaned room. Charging is the act of cleaning. You spend energy to impose a structured imbalance. Discharging is living in the room. You get usefulness out of that order. Degradation is what happens when the room accumulates irreversible messes, spills you can't fully clean, scratches that remain, broken hinges. And once you see that, you stop asking for miracles and start asking for thresholds. Because a world-changing battery doesn't just improve one metric. It crosses multiple thresholds at once. So let's state them plainly. A true step change must hit multiple axes simultaneously. At the pack level, not in a single pristine lab cell. First, 2 to 3 times the gravimetric energy density at pack level. Not 10% better. Not, maybe in theory. A step that changes the economics of range, weight, and infrastructure. Second, long cycle life, thousands of cycles, while still holding useful capacity. Because a battery that wears out quickly isn't an energy solution, it's a materials consumption problem. Third, fast charging without degradation. Not just. It can charge fast once. Fast charging repeatedly, in the hands of ordinary people, in ordinary weather, without quietly killing the cell. Fourth, intrinsic safety. Not safety by building a tank around a bomb. Safety by chemistry and architecture that doesn't cascade into catastrophe when something goes wrong. Fifth, abundant materials and scalable manufacturing. A battery that depends on rare elements, delicate processing, or extreme purity might be brilliant but still not transform civilization. Because civilization is a scaling phenomenon. And here's the painful honesty. If a candidate fails one of these axes, it often becomes niche, not transformative. That's not an insult. Niche matters. Grid storage is not the same as aviation. A phone battery is not the same as a submarine battery. But when people promise a single battery will solve everything, they are usually promising to break physics, economics, and logistics at the same time. Now let's return mentally to that parking lot. Your phone is still dying. The air is cold. You can hear distant traffic. A thin anxiety tightens in your chest because stored energy is not an abstraction anymore. It's the difference between calling for help and being stranded in the dark. What changes when you carry this understanding with you? You stop seeing the battery as a disappointment. You start seeing it as one of the most astonishing compromises humans have ever engineered. Because think about what we're actually doing when we charge a battery. We are forcing ions into structures that would rather not host them. We are asking molecules to remain intact while we push them against their preferred reactions. We are creating a controlled chemical tension and then trusting that tension to wait, quietly, until we need it. Energy isn't just something we have. It's something we continuously negotiate with the universe. Every watt-hour is a treaty between what we want and what equilibrium wants. And that treaty has terms. If you want high energy density, the treaty becomes fragile. If you want long life, you accept lower stress and lower extremes. If you want fast charging, you pay with heat management and interface stability. If you want cheap and abundant, you compromise on weight or voltage. The universe is not punishing us. It's pricing the difficulty of holding order. So what should you feel when you see a battery percentage now? Not just anxiety or impatience. Maybe a kind of reverence. Because that little icon represents a temporary defiance of entropy, engineered so well that you can carry it in your pocket without thinking about it most days. And yes, there are breakthroughs coming. Better cathodes. Better electrolytes. Better manufacturing. Smarter management systems. The slope is upward. But the slope is not infinite. And the reason it isn't infinite is the deepest theme of this entire audit. Storage is hard because storing energy means storing a difference, and differences want to die. Let's do one final thought experiment, and I want you to feel it, not just understand it. Imagine you could pause time and look at a fully charged battery as if it were a landscape. On one side you have atoms arranged so electrons are energetically high. On the other, atoms arranged so electrons are low. Between them is a barrier, material, chemical, structural, preventing the electrons from simply taking the shortest path down. Your entire modern life depends on building barriers that are strong enough to prevent chaos, but permeable enough to allow controlled flow when you ask for it. That is a knife-edge requirement. Too strong a barrier, and the battery can't deliver power. Too weak and it self-discharges, degrades, or fails catastrophically. Batteries aren't just containers. They're carefully tuned gates in an energetic dam. And now, the synthesis, what we've learned, stripped to its bones. Gasoline seems miraculous because it carries enormous energy and borrows oxygen from the air. Batteries must carry their whole reaction set internally. Batteries can deliver power brilliantly, but their total stored energy is constrained by chemistry and stability. Lithium-ion won because it found a reversible way to shuttle ions without instantly destroying itself, but it still faces ceilings, voltage windows, fragile electrolytes, dendrites, heat, and the ever-present tax of entropy. Frontier technologies offer real promise, but each one fights its own bottlenecks, interfaces, reversibility, energy density, cost scale. And the deeper truth is this: we weren't comparing gadgets. We were comparing strategies for persuading matter to hold a gradient, to remember a non-equilibrium state. A battery is a temporary pocket of low entropy, and keeping it is expensive. Now I want to leave you with a contemplative takeaway you can carry into your own life. Tonight, or tomorrow, look around your world for gradients you take for granted. A warm cup of coffee cooling to room temperature. A charged phone draining. A relationship that thrives only when you keep putting energy into it. A skill that decays when you stop practicing. These aren't just metaphors. They're the same law wearing different masks. Ordered states don't persist for free. Maintaining a difference always costs something. And that brings us to the next great question, the door we haven't opened yet. If storing energy is really the art of holding back equilibrium, then what does that imply for the biggest battery we know, the climate system itself? The oceans, the ice, the atmosphere, the planet's ability to absorb and release heat over decades and centuries. If we misunderstand storage at the scale of a car, what else might we be misunderstanding at the scale of Earth? If you want to keep going, there's another investigation waiting on the end screen that builds directly on this. Watch that next, because it'll extend the thread we just pulled into a much larger tapestry. And if you found value in this style of audit, where we chase the numbers, translate the jargon, and still make room for wonder, subscribe. Not for updates. For a way of thinking you can carry into every headline and every hype cycle. Before you go, I want to hear one simple answer from you in the comments. What matters more in your life right now, range, charging speed, cost, or battery lifespan? Just pick one. And as you answer, notice what you're really naming, which constraint you've been living under without realizing it.